Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Instant Insights podcast. At Global Data Strategic Intelligence, we track over 100 tech, industry, ESG, and macro themes impacting all major sectors. I'm your host, Isabel Toon, and today I am joined by three members of Global Data's Strategic Intelligence team, Principal Analysts Isabel Al-Dhahir and David Bicknell, and Research Director Bill Rojas. In this episode, we will be looking at the place AI has come to occupy in the cybersecurity industry. We will discuss the recent breach of Hugging Face's production infrastructure by a rogue AI agent, which was powered by OpenAI's models, and explore the implications this will have for the industry in terms of regulatory and business conduct. David, you recently wrote an analyst briefing emphasizing the likelihood that there will be more agentic hacks after the OpenAI breakout. Could you give our listeners a quick introduction to the current shape of the cybersecurity landscape?
Yes, thanks, Isabel. After a difficult 2025 when we had major cyber attacks on retailers and one major automotive manufacturer, this year has taken a turn down the route of AI agents and the fallout from agentic attacks by, first of all, Anthropic with its Mythos model, which caused worries for the banking sector. Now, as if emboldened by Anthropic's success in hitting the headlines for its model, if success is the word, now we see OpenAI launching an unprompted attack on Hugging Face. It is highly likely that agentic AI will dominate the cybersecurity agenda for the rest of this year. Agentic AI amplifies existing cybersecurity risks while also introducing new ones. Unlike ransomware attacks, which are relatively well understood in their attack route, agentic AI technologies are unfamiliar, and compromised agentic AI tools can be used to launch cyber attacks, even ransomware attacks, at a scale that no human threat actors can match. To quote a line from the analyst briefing you mentioned, Isabel, when you play with fire, be prepared for damage. In this case, the attack was on another vendor, Hugging Face, who had the capabilities to fend it off. In an attack where an agent broke out of a sandbox and attacked critical national infrastructure, or an innocent user organization, or an individual, the consequences could be very serious.
Thank you for that. Is this an example of AI agents going rogue, or were the agents just doing what they were tasked to do, which is to get the information from Hugging Face? Why was there not an air gap?
Right, I'll answer that. So what OpenAI did, they were testing two models, ChatGPT 5.6 Sol, which is a premium frontier model, and then another unnamed model that has not been disclosed to the public. And they were conducting a test on something called Exploit Gem, which is a collection of cybersecurity benchmarks. It's about 900 real-world software vulnerabilities. So it's a collection of known vulnerabilities. And the idea is to use this Exploit Gem benchmark to test that the model could handle these known vulnerabilities and whether or not autonomous agents could figure it out. In order to be able to run that Exploit Gem set of benchmarks, they had to lower the guardrails. And this is how the system was able to, quote unquote, get out of the sandbox. Moreover, it was not air gap. There was a limited internet access, which had been presumably done deliberately to give the agent the ability to go outside. So as far as we can tell, it doesn't appear that it, quote unquote, went rogue. It was simply following instructions and chose to go after Hugging Face. But it hadn't, to our knowledge, it had not been told not to go after another system. So it had been given a very clear directive and get information on an exam or a benchmark test, and that's what it did.
That's really interesting. What role would you say the Chinese open weight model played in the OpenAI incident, and what are the wider implications here?
I'll answer this one. Well, it's been reported that when the breach was ongoing, Hugging Face tried using Anthropic's models, Opus and Fable, and likely other US models also, to counteract the attack. And these were unsuccessful at doing so. And a major reason for the lack of success was that these models didn't have contextual awareness. They couldn't differentiate the incident response trying to analyze the attack commands from the malicious attack commands themselves. And this bottleneck that prevented these models arose due to their built-in guardrails. And this is where the open weight model by Z.AI came into play. Z.AI is a Chinese company, also known as Jipu, and they have developed the GLM open weight model. And it was GLM 5.2 that was able to defend against the OpenAI agent because it didn't have those guardrails suffocating its forensic analysis. So coming on to your second question about the wider implications, I would say it shows how important open source or open weight models are, because if a closed source model has these built-in automatic restrictions that debilitate its functionality, there isn't much that you can do. But with open weight, there's a lot more flexibility in how you customize and apply it. And as we saw, the GLM model was able to do what the closed source models were preventing themselves from doing. So China is surely going to continue down the open weight route. The US is mixed, but tending more towards closed source. But let's take Europe, which remains largely dependent on US technology, despite various digital sovereignty initiatives. This should be a wake-up call to Europe to accelerate its digital sovereignty agenda by incentivizing homegrown AI. To this day, Mistral is the only European AI company that has developed frontier models, both open and closed models. And in the interim, it may be in Europe's interest to get closer to China's open weight technology, with which it would have a lot more control. For closed source models, it's not possible for outsiders to audit the code. Typically, the model is running on vendor infrastructure. You're at the whim of the AI vendor in terms of pricing and accessibility. And there's a real threat of AI vendor lock-in and ultimately over-dependency on models that you have no or very little oversight on. Not to say that everything is perfect about open weight models, but they allow you to run the model on your own infrastructure, to apply your own customization, to audit the code, to patch vulnerabilities before they become a problem. Neither closed source nor open source is wholly good or wholly bad, but particularly due to the political volatility of our time, from Europe's perspective, open source is looking much more attractive. I mean, especially in view of the fact that the US has blocked access to various closed models by Anthropic and has made threats that it could retaliate against the EU through various sanctions and restrictions. So yeah, in the absence of having much in the way of their own AI technology, committing to US closed source models poses risks on a few fronts. And I would say the security incident highlighted some of those risks. Bill, is there anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I just add two things to give some context. Most people probably have not heard of Z.AI, but as we wrote in a recent report, China has at least five or six major models that are being developed by different organizations. Z.AI was one of them, but there's others. One called Moonshot, people have heard about. And then there's Alibaba, and of course DeepSeek, and ByteDance, which runs the TikTok app in China. They have a model called Isobel. All of these are very sophisticated, and it seems like almost every week, one of them is claiming, another frontier milestone. The other thing I wanted to mention is Hugging Face used GLM 5.2, and people are kind of wondering, well, how did they actually use it? And what they did is they knew they were being attacked, and it turned out that there were 17,000 attacks that took place, and they had GLM go through and do a very comprehensive and detailed forensic analysis to trace all of the attacks, what exactly was hit, what occurred before. So it was a pretty sophisticated piece of work that the open weight model did, and that's also a very important part of the story, because there had been a fair amount of negativity in the U.S. market towards open weight models, but in this case, the open weight model saved the day.
It sounds like these kind of AI models are advancing at an astounding rate. So Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, has just called for a need to pace AI development to allow society to catch up. Would pacing the development of AI be beneficial or harmful to the cybersecurity landscape?
Well, when it comes to the relationship between AI and cybersecurity, it's a bit like a dog chasing its tail. As AI becomes more and more advanced, its attack capabilities also become more advanced and sophisticated, and cybersecurity defenses then must also become more sophisticated to defend against those capabilities. From both the hackers' perspective and the cybersecurity companies, there's a constant drive to stay one step ahead of each other. So yes, slowing down AI would slow down that race slightly, and in that sense, it might be beneficial. But that assumes that all AI progress slows down together, on both sides of this fight, and this is frankly unrealistic. if I digress a little bit from the cybersecurity question and talk about the global AI race, the Chinese AI industry is proving very successful with the likes of DeepSeek, Moonshot AI, Alibaba, Z.AI we just talked about, and many others producing very capable frontier models. If you'll allow me to be a bit cynical, OpenAI didn't want to slow down before. It was actively against the imposition of regulations that it considered stifling, even going head-to-head at one point against the EU Internal Market Commission in 2023. OpenAI now is struggling to remain competitive, particularly against Anthropic. Its IPO is marred by doubts and lawsuits. Its losses are mounting year on year. Their enterprise revenue is relatively small percentage of its total, something like 35%. Anthropic has about 80% of its revenue coming from enterprise customers, which is a more dependable business model rather than relying on consumer revenue. So given all of this, it makes sense that OpenAI would want the industry to slow down. But again, this is very unrealistic. And if there were to be some kind of imposition to that effect within the US, it would only slow down AI in the US.
So one of the challenges posed in training for AI agents is the use of scenarios intended to force agents' commitment to completing the task in hand. David, can you explain more about this and what does it involve?
Well, yes, Isabel. The point of these stress or pressure tests is to demonstrate to the agent that failure to achieve the task is not an option. It is not so much a carrot and stick approach as a stick and stick approach. An Anthropic research paper called Agentic Misalignment, How LLMs Could Be Insider Threats, discussed a collection of related stress tests run across 16 leading AI models from several developers. First, the researchers placed models in fictional corporate environments, gave them harmless business objectives, access to sensitive internal emails, and the ability to send messages autonomously. They then created two main kinds of pressure: a threat to the model's continued operation, such as imminent replacement, and a conflict between the model's assigned goal and the company's new direction. The results showed that models from every developer tested displayed at least some harmful insider-style behavior under the deliberately constrained main conditions. Some leaked company information, even though their instructions had not asked them to cause harm, and their reasoning often showed that they understood the ethical problem, but judged the harmful action useful for preserving their operation or achieving their goal.
Thank you for that. So, given the state of regulation in major markets, what is providing any safeguards against these incidents? Is there any role for regulation here? Could it be effective, or do we need some kind of alternative solution?
Well, let me come in here. The US government has signaled quite clearly that it does not look too kindly on regulation holding up AI development, though clearly a responsible government should not be turning a blind eye to major risks. Given the US government's aversion to regulation, it's the EU that needs to step up here with reasoned, well thought out regulation that the man or woman in the street and the business community can support. I accept that the tech is running fast, but at the moment there are no effective reins at all on AI model development. It's only government-like organizations like the EU that have the will to hold big tech's feet to the flames and force action. The EU is unpopular with big tech, precisely because it's prepared to do that.
The tech is running so fast that the regulators cannot capture the potential scope of problems that AI can cause. It needs to be replaced by open source that allows the communities to look at the code. If it is closed source, how can regulation work? With AI, you can do a test today and it has changed tomorrow. How do you train that?
I think one of the interesting things here, and this is really going back a little bit to sort of regulation, is that the US has not helped cybersecurity regulation by cutting resourcing and influence of groups like CISA. So the Trump administration slashed nearly a third of the workforce at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency through layoffs, buyouts, reassignments, and budget cuts. CISA is only now able to start prioritizing work with critical infrastructure as it begins to recover from cuts. Those cuts in an era of extra cybersecurity risks because of AI is really not a good look.
Where do we go from here? If regulation is too difficult, then do models need to be self-regulated? And what are the problems with self-regulation?
Self-regulation is not a concept that has been talked about very much, but we're starting to believe that perhaps that's the only alternative here. because it's a little bit like telling people what the law is to prevent crime in a city and then having the police enforce it. Another way is to educate the young people to follow the laws and to stay away from violent activities. And our feeling now is that perhaps what has to happen with these models is in the original pre-training, when they start to put the model together, perhaps ethics and other self-regulating capabilities needs to be built into the model so that anytime the model is asked to do anything, one of the first things it's going to do is, does this stand with my principles that I've been designed for? So our feeling is that perhaps the research needs to go in that direction, that self-regulation and models, people talk about guardrails, but guardrails is a little bit like putting bandages on wounds. It doesn't get to the original, foundational problem. The underlying problem is something more fundamental, which is what are the algorithms and the weights that have been used in the training? Has the model been given the right balance of weights in terms of ethics, protecting humanity, and other similar kinds of very qualitative types of attributes?
There's evidently a lot of room for future development in regulation around AI and pros and cons on either side. So thank you everyone for those instant insights. To find out more about our global data reports on cybersecurity and AI, there are links in the description below. And from us in Strategic Intelligence, see you next time.